Hi guys, this is Miss Jackson. So I'm getting a lot of questions about today's math lesson, specifically in our Go Math book, chapter 10, lesson 1. And I want to go over it with some students. I'm going to try every day or as often as possible to really make some videos that students can use or parents can use if they want to explain anything to their students. So I'm going to be taking some time. I believe this video is going to eventually cut off and I'll have to make a part 2, but these will both be uploaded for you guys to use whenever you need them. So I'm going to be going through page 551, most likely going from about number 1, probably to about numbers 10 to 11, depending on how much I feel students will need some explanation, simply because we've talked about lines, we talked about angles, we haven't had a lot of practice with labeling them. We've identified them, but we haven't really labeled them too much in class, and we haven't really tried to identify them in figures, because we have figure M right here, and then we have figure F down here. So I'm going to be going through some things. Students can watch this as many times as they feel they need to. It's going to help them later on with later lessons as well. And then if parents are getting confused with anything their students doing, you can absolutely watch this again. So before we go over this, I am going to encourage students on page 549, there actually is a really, really good definitions chart that explains what a point is, what a line is, what a line segment is, and what array is, and how you can properly label those. If anyone's getting really overwhelmed or confused about that, please make sure you come right to this chart, because it really tells you what a line is. It gives you an example, and then it talks about how you can see it. And I want you to pay attention to how it's written over here, because that's what we're going to be going over later. So I know that they are trying to identify or label a line when I see a line on top of 2 points and there are arrows at each end. I know that they're talking about a line segment when I see possibly 2 points, but I just see a line. There's no arrows at the end of that. And then I know that they're talking about array when I see 2 points, but at least 1 or 2 points, but they have an arrow on one side and no arrow on the other. So I want you to keep that in mind as well. And then when we come over here to angles, I want you guys to keep in mind that with an angle can be labeled really in 3 ways. So I know that an angle happens when there are 2 lines that meet. So I'm looking at this angle and there's 3 points. There's point P, Q, and R. And that's one way that's labeled. It's labeled as angle P, Q, and R. It's also labeled that way over here. It can also be labeled as angle R, Q, and P. So there's R, Q, and P. But then I see there's angle Q. Whenever there's an angle that is labeled this way, don't get worried. Simply, it means that Q is the point where the 2 lines meet, and that's where an angle actually is formed, when 2 lines meet. So I want you to keep that in mind. Now we're going to go on to our example. I hope that I helped some friends understand the chart a little more before we get right into using what we've learned from our chart. So number 1 says, draw and label something in the space at the right. And I'm looking really, really closely, and they're trying to tell me to draw a line, but let me see. So I see letters A and B. I know those are both endpoints. I know those are both points. But I'm looking at the line on top. There are no arrows, so this would be a line segment. I'm actually going to be doing my work over here on a white sheet of paper. So let me see number 1. And it told me to rewrite this and kind of fill it in for myself. So let me see. So I know line A and B is a line segment. Again, I may be using that worksheet for myself in the future, so I don't want to write directly on this for myself. So if I'm drawing A and B as a line segment, I know that I have letters A and B. A is an endpoint, so I'm going to put point A here. I know B is an endpoint, so I'm putting point B here, and then I'm drawing a line in the middle. And that's it. Number 1 is done. So I wrote down that A and B is a line segment, and I labeled it. All done. Now moving on to number 2. Number 2, we're doing a lot of this practicing. So this was really just explicit. This is more so practice. So draw and label an example of the figure. So let me see. I see points X and Y. There's a line on top, but there are arrows at both sides. So this is a regular line. So I'm going to come over here. I'm going to just kind of draw my regular line first. And then I know that I have points X and Y. So I'm going to put point X on one side and put point Y on the other. Something you should never ever do is see a line and say, oh, it says line XY. Okay. And then go on the side and write XY. That's never going to be the correct answer. It'll be good that you understand that that was a line, but each letter represents a point. So you have to make sure you're showing those points. Now we're going on to number 3. And now it says obtuse angle K. And I'm going to come back over to this chart because I remember that sometimes an angle will have about 3 points in it. 1 point will be on each line and 1 point will be where the lines meet. However, I also remember that if there's only one letter in my explanation of my angle, that just means that's the point where my 2 lines meet. So I'm going to come back over here. It says obtuse angle K. And I'm going to draw my obtuse angle first. Again, we do have a nice chart over here that explains the difference between the angles. We did not go over what a straight angle was in class, but we did go over the rest of them. So remember, a right angle is when you form a perfect corner of a square. An acute angle means the lines are closer together. And it's smaller than a right angle. An obtuse angle means that the lines are further apart. And it is bigger than a right angle. So I'm going to come over here to my number 3. So I know I'm making a right angle. Sorry, my paper's a little slippery, so it's not going to be perfect. Drawing my arrows for my lines right here. And I know that I have point K. And point K is where the 2 lines meet. So I have this line, this is where the points meet. I have point K, and then I'm going to just draw this little curve right here. And that really lets people that are looking at my paper know that I'm aware that I just made an angle and that I am labeling a specific angle. Now we're moving down to number 4. Number 4 says right angle CDE. I know that, that all of these letters are points. And I'm actually going to come back over here and I see, let's see, PQR. So it's PQR. So that letter in the middle shows me that that's the point where my 2 lines meet. So let me see, CDE, D is in the middle. That's the point where my lines meet. So I'm going to come right back over here, drawing my right angle